Good morning. This is the Accessibility and Disability Policy webinar series. In celebration of Autism Acceptance and Awareness Month, today's session is Empowerment Building Success with Employees with Autism with Jennifer Hines of the Texas Workforce Commission Vocational Rehabilitation Services, Jennifer Allen of Asperger's 101, and Jen Byron Ross of HEB. I'm turning it over to Jennifer Hines now. One moment. All right, Jennifer, take it away.
All right, good morning. I'm glad to see so many people with us this morning. So I'm Jennifer Hines. I'm the State Neurodevelopmental Disorders Program Specialist. I've been here for 8 years. I'm going to talk to you about autism in our vocational rehabilitation services this morning. Next slide. All right, transitioning from school to post-secondary options, such as college, technical training programs, or employment, can prove challenging for anybody, right? Transitioning from high school to the work world is just not easy for anybody. But most high school students have the skills that are needed because they're equipped with the skills that they have to do this. However, if you're one of those students that is not equipped with the right skills, then your chances of transitioning successfully or even at all are greatly diminished. Along with having learning difficulties and social skill deficits, these students receive special education services. They can be at a disadvantage for another reason. Special education is intended to create an individualized education plan that allows the ART committee to create and place all accommodations and modifications that are needed for the student's success. This, however, though, can set up the student with special needs to expect this level of support in the world of work. And that's not always realistic. So it's really imperative that we're having this conversation today because we want to graduate students who are equipped with the most skills possible and experiences so they can thrive in competitive and integrative employment. And that is what VR is about, getting these kids competitive and integrative employment opportunities. Back up a slide, please. So right here, this is a picture of a black hole that we all fear as parents. I'm a parent of a 24-year-old with autism who he transitioned successfully. It wasn't easy, but he's now full-time employed. But all of us parents, we fear this black hole between graduation and adulthood. And if there's not that clear transition plan, a student can fall in this, and those ages are between 18 to 24. And successful transition is a priority to vocational rehabilitation. The federal government in 2014 passed legislation that said that VR had to do 15% of all their funds had to go to pre-employment services because transition is so important. And now we are, because of this, we are partnering with school districts all over the state to provide some of these services. Next slide, please. Well, so who's the most at risk? Well, who we're talking about today, right? Autism. Autism is the most at risk. And really it's the nature of the disability. If they don't successfully transition into employment or other post-secondary things like college, the nature of their characteristics of the disability can come out. Their rigid thought patterns, the resistance to change, they're the ones that can be stuck at home, even though they are so employable and have so many wonderful characteristics that can provide the workforce. Next slide, please. So everybody knows these numbers are increasing, but I wanted to share some that are in their schools. This is from Texas Education Agency, TEA. As you can see, over 20,000 students increased in just 4 years. That's just phenomenal. And so you know, about 12,000 of those 66,000 that you're looking at are graduating. So 12,000 are coming into our workforce. So Texas Workforce Commission, Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, what is this? And how are we helping autism transition from school to work? Let me tell you a little bit about what we do. First of all, vocational rehabilitation serves all disabilities of all ages. But just today I'm going to focus on autism. Next slide, please. So what's the purpose of vocational rehabilitation? Well, overall, it's to remove a barrier to obtaining or maintaining employment for an individual with a disability. However, not every disability is a barrier to employment. So someone can be blind and that does not impede their job, let's say as a news reporter, or someone has autism, ADHD, and they learned early they need to be their own boss, or that they need to set their own schedule and a field that makes them creative. I'm sure we all know somebody with a disability who's just soared high in their employment field, but for those whose disability is a barrier, then vocational rehabilitation is here to help them, or at least lessen the impact of that disability. So here's some Texas VR best facts. In 2016, we moved to the Texas Workforce Commission. Formerly, we were under the Health and Human Services Department of Assistive and Rehabilitation Services. You might have heard, DARS, and we combined with Blind Services. We are a very large agency. I don't think people really understand how big we are. We have almost 700 VR counselors, and these counselors have master's degrees in vocational rehabilitation. Many are certified rehabilitation counselors. We have over 120 offices, and we're kind of in the process of integrating them into our local workforce boards. We served almost 75,000 people last year. Out of that, 36,000 have a neurodevelopmental disorder, which is IDD, or intellectual developmental disorder, ADHD, autism, and learning disabilities. But out of that 36,000, nearly 8,000 of them with autism. And if we continue the trend of growth that we're at, it'll be 10,000 in 2020. So it'll be the largest population by then if we continue going as high as we have been. All right, so vocational rehabilitation. Here's just some 101 facts I'm going to give you. We start serving as young as 14 years old. Our transition age that we talk about is 14 to 22, and that is our largest age population we serve. Our neurodevelopmental disorders is our largest disability population, and like I said, autism is our fastest growing disability population. It is a time-limited service. We get in there, and we look at what the barriers are, and then there's an end in the mind. People can always come back if they need to. There's an eligibility criteria, and it can be accessed through the individual's lifetime. Next slide, please. So as you can see, our numbers have a trend straight up. I came in 2011. You can see we had 2,300. And as of today, we're over 8,000. So there is a thing called a VR process. So when a customer comes in, they're going to start with the first step is, are you eligible? Because it is an eligibility service. So these are the eligibility criteria we have. You need to have a physical or mental impairment. The impairment must constitute a substantial impediment to employment. The individual must require VR services to prepare for, enter, engage, and retain gainful employment. And we look at their strengths, their resources, the priorities, the concerns they have, abilities, their capabilities, their interests, and of course we give them informed choice. And they also must be capable of achieving employment. So the next step is that we're going to create their individual plan of employment. And it's not unlike just like school where they have the IPEE. In this plan, it identifies the barriers that are present and then how we plan to remove them. It's going to outline and help them with achieve their employment goal, and then it's going to list some services that are needed to achieve this plan. So some of those services that VR can provide are the following, and these are the key to removing these identified barriers. They're very individualistic, so I can't just give you there's nothing cut and paste about what we do. It's really up to the customer and what they need. But some of the things can be career guidance and counseling, meeting with the counselor and talking to them about how they want to explore their career, what are they in need of. Psychological, behavioral, vocational, and medical evaluations can be a part of it. Therapy, there again, psychological, behavioral, physical, speech, occupational, medical equipment. Some of our things we focus on with our younger students, our transition age, are work experiences, internships. Some are paid employment. We have college or technical training assistance that we can help with. And of course, we find job development and we place people into employment. And that can also include job coaching. So when I came 8 years ago, we had very little services that were specific to autism. So one of the first things I identified is that we had to create these specialized supports, and we had to train our staff. We had to train our employment specialists. We needed to have some interventions specific to autism and other neurodevelopmental disorders, such as ABA. So here are some things that we've created since 2011. So there's a statewide team dedicated to autism. It's led by me. I'm a board certified and licensed behavior analyst. And as of today, we have about 120 people on this statewide team. We have trained specialty ER counselors in each office. So not every person with autism will go to these counselors, but they're like this, they're the SME of that office. But we do have tougher cases. They go on their caseload. We contract with employment specialists who have an autism endorsement that they've earned through the University of North Texas. We have about 250 to date that have an autism endorsement. They've had to go through specialized training in order to earn this. We have autism-specific psychological batteries for a better and accurate diagnosis. We use specialized career interest and exploration assessments. We have clinical treatment. Like I said, ABA is now available. We can pay for that. We have non-clinical treatment. I created a thing called ASD supports, and it can be provided in the job, in the home, in the community. And then we also contract with post-secondary programs and colleges that have specialized supports for students with autism. Many of the colleges are now creating programs specifically for autism so we can keep these kids successful in college. Because over half that start college typically do not finish if they have autism. So I have a question for you guys, and you can answer in your little chat. So typically, what is the hardest job for you to obtain? And you can just put it on in the chat room. Does anybody know what your hardest job to obtain? Somebody saying anything with a lot of social interaction. Okay, true. Well, what's your hardest job? Your first. Very good. 2 people said it. Your first job. This is absolutely true. Your first job is very hard. You can click on it. It'll give you the answer. Right. And especially for somebody with autism, just getting in the interview, the ability to interview is hard. Having those connections, all of that is your first one. So that's why early employment exposure is so important. Go ahead and next slide. Everybody needs their first job. And the earlier, the better. They don't need to be perfect. We don't need to have all the skills necessary. We need our first job as soon as possible. We all have first jobs that we didn't exactly love. And your first job is not about loving what you do. It's about learning how the real world works. No one comes out of college with their career job. And every job, no matter how small, opens up opportunities and will lead you to the one you want. I don't know. I mean, not everybody went to college and knew exactly what they wanted, and now they're in the career. Some people do that, but you typically find out other jobs, and you find out the opportunities by having you're being exposed to other jobs when you have your first job. I would have never known I was going to do autism. I answered a nanny ad, and the child happened to have autism, and now I'm in this field. You just never know. A job is also intervention for somebody with autism. It's naturally will help them develop more cognitive flexibility, problem-solving skills, and they learn to teach and learn more unspoken work roles and the social norms. And work will become real, and the purpose of it and the drive will naturally be learned through the first paycheck. So it is very important. All right, so here's an example of some early work experience that VR offers. We have a program called the Summer Earn and Learn, or SEAL program, and it provides students with disabilities aged 14 to 22 work readiness training and paid work experience. And it's a partnership between TWC and our local workforce development boards, also with our Vocational Rehabilitation services. It's an excellent program. It's relatively new. It happens in the summers. And the wages and the workers' compensation insurance are covered by the boards. And for businesses, it's an opportunity to provide work experience and skills for these participants. So we're always looking for businesses who want to partner with us. Accommodations are required by the participants are provided. As of like they need job coaching, we provide that. and the employers will receive an orientation prior to placement. And right there, if you click on that when you receive this PowerPoint, you can learn more how to sign up for it. All right, another question. What is the fastest way to lose a job? Besides not showing up. We know that's definitely one.
Answer in your chat box. Thank you.
Not meeting deadlines. True. And we're talking about autism, though. Okay, go ahead and give the answer. All right, so if you ever told your boss he's an idiot, right? Maybe he is an idiot, but maybe if you told him that. Otherwise, in his social skill deficits. That is the most common reason that our guys with autism will lose a job. Maybe they're not going to say something like they're an idiot, but there's some kind of unspoken work rule they don't get, or they violate, or some social skill deficit that is how they can lose their job. So it is extremely important. So, interviewer, what do you make at your current job? Me, mostly mistakes and inappropriate comments. Okay, we don't want that, right? And that's why, next slide, I say the consequences of social skill deficits are very real. So in college, we've had students kicked out for harassment of a professor. This one kid, he texted professor 10 times, then called 20, and then met her in the parking lot asking for, he just wanted his answer question. And he was kicked out of that college. Employment, somebody being fired after violating an unspoken work rule happens more than you think. All right, so in VR, we really focus on early employment experience and social communication skills training, because what we have seen, it really does lead to greater competitive integrative employment opportunities for our guys in the spectrum. Our hardest person to place is a brilliant person on the spectrum, is 144 IQ and 2 degrees. And why? It's because they typically have never held a job, and they have limited social skills. And so it's really important that we get that training early on. All right, you're going to hear from some of these, but we have companies with autism hiring initiatives, which is really exciting. You're going to hear from one of them today. They're partnering. Companies are seeing the assets of autism in employment, which you're going to hear further. And VR is always continually trying to partner with companies so we can give greater opportunities, employment options for our students with autism. And if you're interested in VR, you click directly on that link and you see a directory for our VR offices.
Jennifer, thank you so much. I appreciate the information. And we'll get to questions at the end of the session. Let me go ahead and pull up the next training materials. 1 second. And we're going to turn it over to Jennifer Allen.
Thank you, Randy, and I welcome everyone. I'm so glad to hear that we had so many people on the call today. I found Jennifer Hines, everything that she was saying, so fascinating. I don't think I realized how high the numbers are climbing and how quickly those with autism. I think it was staggering to hear that it's going to be the #1 disability in numbers pretty soon, and love to hear all the services that are also provided. So I'm sandwiched between the Jennifers, and I'm glad to be there. Anyway, my name is Jennifer Allen, and I'm the founder of Asperger's 101. We're an online resource, and this was created really because my son Samuel has autism. He's on the higher end of the spectrum, and I was in broadcasting before, and it totally transformed our lives. And once we felt that we would understand Sam, who is now 24 years old, but when he was going through school, schools didn't know about Asperger's syndrome at that time, and finding out a lot of people didn't. So we're trying to create a resource that would enlighten. And what's amazing is we're talking to you, employers, today, and I think some people I saw on the chat line, some people that are actually on the spectrum seeking employment as well. But what I love is that there are more areas of people wanting more information to understand better autism. And I love that, from law enforcement to even doctors, to educators, and to employers. So I love where we're going and where we are with awareness. So what I am going to be talking about is more of a basic understanding of autism, if you will. And for some of you, you live it, and so you already know it. But for the employers that are joining us, we wanted to just give an overview of what it might look like. So let's begin with a basic understanding of autism itself. Next slide. Okay, so we'll go on to the next one, if you will, Randy. So by looking at what autism is, you can look at a definition, and probably everyone has read that it's a complex developmental disability. Signs typically appear during early childhood and affect a person's ability to communicate and interact with others. Autism spectrum disorders is defined by a certain set of behaviors and is a spectrum condition that affects every individual differently and to varying degrees. I think that's real important. That's something that I will tout throughout this presentation, how everyone with autism is so unique. Okay, next slide. Well, here is something that I asked my son Samuel to record for you. It's a question that a lot of us neurotypicals ask. What does it feel like to have autism? Well, our logo was actually created by a painting he had done when he wanted to express to others what it felt like. Let's listen. Are we hearing it? No? Okay, can you try that again, Randy?
Sorry about that. I had to turn my microphone on. That's why we didn't hear it. So give me just a second. We'll start it over.
Okay, thank you.
Give me a second.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. I apologize that I am not able to be there with you all. However, I do want to share my personal experience on what it feels like to have autism. In the spring semester of 2014, I was taking an art class, and one day after I got home from that class, I felt inspired to make a painting about autism. The black and white background represents how we tend to see the world in a black and white perspective. The colors on the inside of the head represent how we tend to have amazing thoughts that are just bursting and waiting to come out. The white lines above the head represent how when we try to speak what's on our minds, it tends to get distorted by our social awkwardness. When I was making this painting, I made it an objective to make this painting be like an inside look for all the outsiders who wanted to know what it felt like to have autism, but were unable to.
Okay, so that is from somebody's perspective of what it feels like. And this is the best way I know to describe to people who are not in the medical community to understand how varied autism is. Know that the spectrum is a wide spectrum. We know that, but there are so many variables. It's not easy just to say this person is low functioning, typically thought of as nonverbal, or higher functioning, typically thought of as savant. These are but there are so many variables such as the comorbidities, next slide, and the comorbidities surround the autism spectrum, which give it such an unusual scale, and that being things such as attention deficit disorder. So you hear of that, ADD, sensory challenges, developmental coordination disorder that can affect many types of jobs that a person with autism might go after. Then you have, as we spoke of, the gifted, those that are the savants, that have special skills. If you remember Rain Man, how all the matches fell on the floor and he could count them. There are specific learning difficulties, dyslexia, dyspraxia that come into play, Tourette's syndrome, OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder, and anxiety, which is, I think, underlying in almost every person with autism. Depression, bipolar, and oppositional defiant disorder may come into play, even schizophrenia. I say all this because this may or may not be typical, but a person who is diagnosed with autism will certainly have one, two, or more of these comorbidities surrounding their diagnosis of autism. I've heard Dr. Tony Atwood say so many times, it isn't the autism itself that can be a challenge, but it is all the comorbidities surrounding it that can be the challenge. So I say this to you not because you're a doctor, but to understand truly that each person with autism is unique and their challenges might be unique. So don't be frightened to discuss this with them, or they might discuss it with you. But once the challenges are addressed, it's amazing how they can go on and provide to be one of the best employees you could ever have. Just sometimes those challenges need to have accommodations, which we'll cover here shortly. Other variations within the autism spectrum, when you're talking about speech, you can go, as we said, from nonverbal to an advanced speech. Those are the variables, such as with intelligence. It could be a lower IQ or a very high IQ. Sensory, hyposensitive, hypersensitive, and the difference being, I have one son who is hypersensitive and can feel everything, and it can hurt. I have another son who's hyposensitive, and when he would go out, let's say to the bus stop, it would be 32 degrees, and he would feel he wouldn't need a coat because he couldn't feel the cold. Well, so that translates into employees maybe feeling or not feeling things that typical neurotypicals would be sensing. Social skills, from poor to, you know what, not that great. This is a big challenge. And as Jennifer Hines had covered earlier, that's one of the things that needs a lot of reinforcement, a special understanding, because when you get to an employee who has autism and has certain gifts, when you find the gifts and you place them in the area, everyone wins. And so you typically wouldn't find a person that would be a greeter. However, I go back to what I said, every person with autism is different. There might be somebody who loves to speak, but typically that's what you find as a challenge. Special skills, well, there might be none, but then there might be some. There might be some that are very unique, like able to count, able to tally things that might be, boring for your average person. So there's gifts within the spectrum for sure. Next slide. So what structural difference may affect the employee diagnosed with autism? Well, we're going to look at 5 different areas, and that being motor control, thinking and processing, social interaction, sensory issues, and anxiety. These might be all that you might find in that. And know that the brain, I find this fascinating, that the brain is literally, before we leave that area, it is literally wired differently. It's the frontal lobe, the fusiform gyrus, that is unique. And what we are finding is that with every challenge the brain encounters, there are gifts. I think that's why I follow medical science so closely, because we're finding that there are challenges, but with every challenge, there's also a gift. And we have a insert in just a moment from Dr. Gail Saltz that will go over that. So next slide. Okay, autism in the workplace. Let's look at this. And let's look at what all that means. So we're going to start with motor control. Next slide, let's look at the challenges and the accommodations for those with motor control. So what could be a potential challenge? Again, I want to start, before we go into this, by saying, don't assume and don't overthink this. The employee will let you know if there is a challenge. I just am wanting to educate you on the backside of what this might look like. But as my son might go in for one of his jobs, I would say, he doesn't want to be known as the person with autism and for everything to be different. He is trying so hard to want to join in and not be known as the person with autism, but the person with the gift of IT. So I tell you all these things, the challenge is not that it freezes you up, but to give you the freedom of knowing that these are indeed challenges and maybe need to be addressed. As we said, each individual person with autism is an individual person with autism. So motor control, fine and gross, those are different. But we're just going to cover the top challenges, and that being handwriting illegible. That could be. So maybe they would like a keyboard to be able to communicate and chat within the organization. Unusual gait, posture, stance, well, that's possible. But that might not be anything that needs to be corrected. My son Samuel walked quite robotically until he was taught to maybe put his arms down and walk typically. But that is something you may notice. Maybe they need an occupational therapist, but I think by the time that they're looking for employment, they're fine with that. Just be aware of any potential safety concerns. And difficulty manipulating small objects or judging distance could be a challenge. Well, it could be a simple accommodation as a special grip on a pen or pencil, but they should let you know and realize that that is coming from a place of different wiring in the brain. They also may display a tic. We talked about one of those comorbidities also might be something like a Tourette's, but people just display tic, and oftentimes that's something they can't control. It's something that they are nervous or stressed out, so it might be something like this you might notice, or a little bit of rocking or patting. That is just a something that they do as a calming mechanism if they are stressed. Okay, let's look at the thinking and processing. The challenges might be that they forget verbal instructions. Well, if this is the case, you might want to create checklists that will help with multi-step processes. This is something that is, they're very visual people for the most part, and that helps. So instead of going over one, the other, if it's written down, they will have that. Sometimes, as Dr. Grandin says, my mind works as though it's a slow computer, and you can just almost see it scrolling. So if you ask a question repetitively, they're going to freeze like a computer would freeze. So sometimes you need to slow it down and offer steps that are written. Distracted by coworkers, well, that could happen. They maybe need headphones or background music or just a quiet space to work. Confused by expected deadlines. Again, what we said earlier, maybe provide a visual timetable. That would be very beneficial. And you might even just ask, would this be helpful? Job growth and performance. You don't just want to go in a job and they're there and they're stuck there. They want to grow like every other employee does. So self-assessment is very good. You can even help them with identifying their strengths and weaknesses. And from that, you might be able to build an extra template for success. Okay, let's look at social interaction. Does not know how to engage with coworkers or small talk. Well, that's pretty common, and a lot of times really that should be on the pro side, because it's really refreshing that a lot of time isn't wasted by being too chatty. But know that small talk is pointless and often painful for people on the spectrum. Unsettled over workplace rules such as breaks or being late. Know that stress is very, very real. And if you see them start to ball up, it might be that they need a break, a little time out, a walk around the building, some fresh air, and then you're back. And they just want to know that everything's okay. They might not be able to maintain eye contact. It has been described as very painful, almost ice picks to the brain. So as long as they're communicating and doing what they need to do, that's good. That we taught Sam at the beginning, just look at somebody, give them a good handshake, and then he's off sometimes looking in different places. No, that's just part of autism. Coworkers and managers, that could be a challenging as far as bullying goes. We discuss here in just a moment how Temple Grandin gives you a case where she was bullied. It was awful, but that can happen, and they sometimes want to address that themselves. But know that you could as an employer, it's really, really good to be able to enlighten your personnel, managers, and even human resources about autism and bullying. Okay, let's go to the next, sensory issues. Wow, this is pretty big. You cannot have autism and have sensory challenges. Sounds and noises, if they bother them at work, it could be as simple as noise-canceling headphones or a quiet space. It makes all the difference, but when repetitive, loud sounds happen, it can take them off task. They'll probably let you know. just a thought to be accommodating for that. Issues such as texture on an office chair or even a company shirt. Now, this is very real and it's close to home. Sometimes a thick polyester shirt that is required by a company could be a stopping point where a person with autism just doesn't want the job because of the pain of the polyester. And while you might say, well, you could wear a cotton t-shirt underneath, it's possible, but it might be that distracting. So you might want to think about offering cotton. It could make all the difference in the world between the employee being able to focus or not focus on the job. Scents such as heavy perfumes or strong odors from, unpleasant or very loud perfumes could do that. But allow for maybe a personal air freshener that gives free, good fresh air into the workspace. Anxiety. Wow. Doesn't this hit us all? I think it does. Usually a person with autism is on some sort of a mild anti-anxiety that seems to help, but anxiety seems to be one of the largest triggers. Unrealistic timeframes. Well, maybe be aware, and if it's possible with your work, modify the work schedule with a step-by-step timeline. I think we've covered that before. Fear of unknown expectations. Well, deadlines and such can almost cause a paralysis in work. Just let them know that what's coming up and how you will deal with it, and written is very, very good. Conflict among coworkers, it could happen. So that's why training is so important, sensitivity training, so people can understand those with autism. And being overstressed, well, just allow them time to decompress. Maybe there's just too much at them, and it could just be a walk around the building and some fresh air. Okay, so let's look at the strengths of the employee diagnosed with autism. I really enjoy this. Dr. Gail Saltz is author of a book, and she's a speaker, and she is really delves into the brain as far as the challenges, but yet the gifts that are being observed. So let's listen. We have a little soundbite for you today about the strengths of those employees with autism.
Okay, 1 second. I'm going to do it right this time.
There are particular strengths that are hardwired to these very specific differences. Strengths, for example, such as increased visual acuity, particularly in peripheral vision, which is connected to this decreased facial recognition. The reason for that may very well be because the areas of strength are actually areas in wiring that are close to or border the areas that have the deficit. Another area of particular strength is the ability to classify objects, which is called increased hypersystemization. And the ability to classify objects can be seen in the symptom, for example, of a fascination with trains and classifying them into different groups of trains of different kinds, and perseverating on that to such a degree that you may be very much a train expert, but also perhaps to the exclusion of other things. But you might also be able to classify objects that have more practical meaning in the world and may relate to one's ability to perform, for example, in the field of technology and computer science remarkably well. People with autism also tend to show an increased drive to analyze or construct systems or patterns of sorts, greater attention to details, and a comfort in repetition and in perseveration. Again, perseveration and attending to minute details can be a symptom of autism if it prevents you from doing other things that you might want to do and might be important to your functioning. But that kind of attention to detail and that kind of comfort in repetition can be a huge strength when it comes to, for example, particular jobs in the technology realm, where it requires one to be able to look at detail over and over again and catch any very tiny mistakes, which someone who does not have autism might have a great deal of difficulty doing. This all lends itself to us as a society really thinking about the ways that the increasing number of adults who are going to be existing with autism might find independence, life satisfaction, and even add greatly to our society's capacity by having them be employed in areas where they actually might be more talented and in fact possess greater strengths attuned to those particular areas.
So the strengths are exciting, and it's something to look at. I noticed that there are a lot of comments and questions that are on the chat line. I wanted to let you know that we'll be available, after all the talks to be able to do more of a Q&A. We'll try to get those answered as well. And I want to let you know that my son, Samuel, who's 24 and has worked and has autism, will also be available for the chat afterwards. I thought he was going to be somewhere today, and he's not, so he's can answer questions if you'd like. So strengths of the employee diagnosed with autism, well, certainly Dr. Saltz went over them, and you will have these for a resource. They're on the screen right now, but there's many. The fact of the matter is that there is a high integrity. There is not a need for chatty and social, and that allows for a lot of intense ability to focus on the job. So there are so many of those, and I think that that's what we need to look at as well as the challenges. And so what is the takeaway? Well, let's look at that. The takeaway, next slide please, is several things. We're offering you some tips from Dr. Temple Grandin. If you can see in the photo, Jen Byron Ross with HEB and Tina James with HEB sat down with me with Temple and asked these questions, and we wanted to share those with you today. That being, if you're an employer, don't be vague. If they're doing something wrong socially, you have to train them as if they're in a foreign country. You must be specific in your training. She says things like, you must be exact, like you're following the customers around the store too much, or you're standing too close to the customers. You can't tell the customers about Star Wars. And I love doing that because I just hear her in my head saying that, and it's wonderful. And also, just don't discuss politics at work. She said that's not a good thing. You're going to get them on to what they think, and they won't be able to stop. Next slide. I love these. Also, when they first come to the office, you need to show them where the restroom is, the basic things. Show them where the break room is. Give them some time to know where everything is. It's just that simple. They also need a boss to mentor them. It's how they'll succeed. And bullies on the job can be a problem, she says. I had sabotage on jobs. The people that were the worst to me was the foreman just under the manager. I talked to Walgreens. They have a program in their warehouse that addresses and prohibits bullying. That was something very real to her. Okay, so let's look at some of the things else. She says, for those of you that are listening that are looking for jobs, and I noticed on the chat there are several, she suggests showing your work when you apply. That she designed the entire front page of every cargo meat packing magazine, and she got that job in the late 80s by sending a professional brochure and a drawing and pictures of jobs in professional sleeves. In other words, she showed her work. And guess what? She was hired. She said it can become a problem when you're doing your job better than your coworkers, and you recognize this. Come a point, you need to learn to mind your own business, she says, because there's a lot of conflict with coworkers. Just stay on task. Don't get into tattling and focus on your job. And some with Asperger's need to learn to get up, get to work, and be there and just do it. A lot of times they aren't learning their basic skills, and a lot of times parents can be too hovering and baby them. And in other words, get out, just learn it and do it. Next slide. Okay, so the review is, we just looked at this, a basic understanding of autism. And we know what that is, autism in the workplace. And we have some takeaways for you. If you could go ahead and go to the next slide. I'm sorry, we're running out of time, Randy. We do have some downloadables for you. For employers, we have a trifold brochure that kind of is a summation of what we discussed. We would love for you to have it. Randy will have that available for you at the end of this. And then for employees, it's a 30-second wow by Dr. Grandin, just a little more than what we had talked about earlier. And both of these are offered in a PDF downloadable, and we would like for you to have that. And really, that's it. We thank you for your time, and I'm looking forward to hear what Jen Byron Ross has to say next.
Thank you, Jennifer. All right, Jen, you're up.
Good morning, everyone. It's so great to talk with each of you. I'm so excited to follow the Jennifers. That was a lot of really great information. And I am here, actually, my name is Jen Byron Ross. I'm the Director of Recruiting in HEB, and I'm representing an employer in our community who is really interested in becoming absolutely even more inclusive to this population. And I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about what we've been doing. Next slide, please. So for those of you who know HEB, or even if you don't, one of the things that I'd want you to know is our culture is really a culture that is people-centric. We believe that people matter, that each and every person counts. It actually says because people matter on our badges, and it's something that we live and breathe every single day. For our partners, employees we call partners at HEB, our customers, and our communities. So culturally, we're already a company that's very interested in meeting people where they are. Next slide. So knowing what we know about autism and learning a little bit more about how we could be even more inclusive, here's what we learned. Click through these for me, Randy. 50,000 people with ASD turn 18 every year. Next, 44% of those will have average to above average intellectual capabilities. 75% of individuals with autism are underemployed. And this one really jumped out at us. 85% of college grads are unemployed. The lowest employment rate of all disabilities is autism. And last, they earn an average of $8.08 an hour nationally. So when we learned more about this, this is absolutely something that we felt we had to engage in to really get in the game to do more. 85% of people not having, being unemployed with a college degree was something that particularly jumped out at us. We have a lot of folks in entry-level jobs making more than $8.08, I'd be happy to share with you, an hour, but still making an entry-level jobs. But college graduates who can't actually work in their field of study was something that really was something we wanted to tackle differently. We have lots of different types of jobs at HEB. Our Chief People Officer, Tina James, is really the inspiration for the work that we do in this space. And she said, we believe that there is an abundance of untapped talent out there that we have not worked hard enough to identify and recruit. And we are committed to doing whatever it takes to recruit, select, and retain these talented individuals so that they can help take HEB to the next level. And we really believe that to be true. So in order to do that, we created a program that we're calling Bridges. And the Bridges program is a hiring initiative to connect talented people with disabilities to qualified career opportunities at HEB by promoting our inclusive culture and reducing barriers for all. What we learned was that we needed a structured program. So if you'll go to the next slide for me. So why? Well, remember I said our culture is very people-centric. So because people matter at HEB, we want to be even more inclusive. We've been doing this for actually over 100 years. For those of you who shop in our stores, I'm sure you've seen that we hire people with many abilities and disabilities in our stores everywhere across the state of Texas and in Mexico. And we know that 1 in 4 US adults have a disability, 1 in 59 with ASD. Well, wait a second, we have great job opportunities from cashier to software developer to vice president of marketing and development. So we have needs. We know that there's this untapped extraordinary talent pool out there. We see this as a win-win, an opportunity for us to attract and retain high talented people by really focusing and proactively recruiting people with disabilities and specifically autism. So the evolution of our program, and we've learned a lot and still have a lot more to learn, really started in 2016 when we put together a structured Bridges team that includes me and a couple of other folks on my team. And what we started with was actually evolving some pilot programs that we had started in our stores with actually the Texas Workforce Commission to hire some of their customers and do that broader. So at that time we had pilot that we were conducting in 20 stores. As we started working harder at this in 2016, we got that to 60 stores in 2017, 240 plus stores in 2018, and this year we'll be able to refer customers from Texas Workforce Commission and others to every single one of our stores at HEB, which we're very proud of. In addition to that, actually stay on that slide, Randy. We also decided to focus on that statistic that I shared with you earlier, that 85% of college graduates with autism are underemployed. So we wanted to put together a program, specifically an internship for people with autism in our IT department, so that they could get some skills and some practice working in a corporate work environment and have a bullet for their resume, and also an opportunity to see what it's like to work at HEB. So we started a pilot in 2017 for people with autism in our IT internship. We have continued that since, and I'm very happy to announce that this summer's group of interns we've broadened it to all disabilities, all internship opportunities, because, and I'll share a little more about this later, what we've really learned is being more inclusive is just really about attracting people and making sure that every opportunity is available to them, and they have exceeded our expectations wildly. So we are really excited about the interns that we're going to have in this summer who go beyond autism, and I think we've learned a lot from our interns in the past. And one of the things I'm actually happy to share with you today is, next slide, Randy, I have a quick video to just share with you a little bit of information about our program and the experience of our participants.
My name is Samuel Allen. I'm currently attending Texas A&M San Antonio for a Bachelor's of Business Administration and Computer Information Systems.
My name is Richard Keith Dishman II. I'm from San Antonio, Texas, and I'm an intern at HEB.
Hello, I'm Patrick Hutchinson. I'm 19 years old, and I am currently a second semester sophomore at the University of Texas at San Antonio.
Hello, my name is Michael Cabeza, and I'm from Andrews Air Force Base, Maryland.
I chose the internship because I wanted to get my feet wet in the IT field, get some job experience working with computers, and basically learn some stuff that I hadn't learned in college.
You get to see earlier, firsthand, what you are going to be expecting in your chosen field of work, so that whenever you do graduate, you're not immediately hit with, I need to do all of this. We learn from people who have experience, and that helps us a lot. I got just the right amount of challenge.
I feel like this experience will help me in my future endeavors.
So that brings a smile to me every single time I see it, to hear from our participants and hear what this has meant to them, the experience that it's given them, to be in an inclusive environment where they could be themselves but also learn and grow in their field of study has been a great opportunity for them and for us. Again, that win-win that we hoped for. So I want to share with you some of the things that we've learned through this experience so far. So lowering the bar, I wouldn't say that we're doing that. And if anything, what we've really learned from our participants so far is a lot of the gifts that you heard Jennifer Allen speaking about just a moment ago. They have detailed, factual, and immense knowledge in an area of interest. So for our folks on the IT internship, we learned they were very passionate about technology. Very precise rule followers, so we really only had to tell them once to do things, and generally they were able to comply with those rules better than most of the other interns. They concentrated, they're highly accurate, they don't waste time chit-chatting, honest to a fault, thinking outside of the box, and highly gifted in science. So some of those other gifts that the Jennifers were actually both sharing, we really found to be true when we had our interns here and the partners that we hire in our stores. And so what we realized is we don't need to lower the bar to hire people with autism. Really what we have to do is create an inclusive environment where they can come in and be themselves and get experience. But this is about really us helping them achieve their greatest potential and share their gifts with us. Not about lowering the bar. Quality is our number one. So next, special management skills. I think this was probably one of the big misnomers that we had when we started this journey, was that we were going to have to make a lot of adjustments to our selection process, our interviewing process, how we manage people on the spectrum. And really what we've learned is most of these things are things that we do and certainly emphasize at HEB with any employee. So we made minor adaptations to the application and interview process. For example, with our interns, we gave them a tour of the facility and gave them the interview questions 30 minutes before to just manage some of their anxiety about being in a new environment. That's probably not something we would do for an experienced hire, but for an internship, it's easy for us to do and offer, and didn't change the process that we used to select it all. We need to provide clear expectations and instructions. Jennifer Allen was just talking about that. That's something we should do for all employees. Provide structure and organization. Actually, these interns and some of our employees have taught us that we could use more structure in how we communicate with all of our employees. And giving that additional structure is a big benefit. Don't assume anything. I think both the Jennifers mentioned this as well. Don't assume that people need an accommodation or have a particular presentation when they come to the job. If I've learned anything from my two experts here that I really value, it is that if you've met one person with autism, you've done just that. You've met one person with autism. And so you can't assume anything. And really, at HEB, we're about meeting people where they are, and that's each individual. If each and every person counts, then each and every one of us will be different when we show up to the workplace. And that's just like everyone else. Patience and understanding, helping avoid misunderstandings with peers. We've talked about bullying earlier and what you do to avoid that. We have a zero tolerance policy at HEB regarding that, and so we work really hard to keep any employee from experiencing anything like that. Knowing how to address anxiety. Anxiety is pretty common in the workforce these days, and is something that we're all learning how to mitigate. And so we're all trying to get better about helping prepare managers to address anxiety issues. So are these in fact really special management skills? We would say no. A lot of these are things that all leaders can do to be successful working with their partners or employees, as we would say. So what did our leaders have to say about their experience with our interns? These interns blew us away. Our Bridges intern was better than the most recent college hire we made. I wish I could have hired him first. That was my favorite one. Exciting to see how sharp they are and how quick they are to pick things up. So really, these guys far exceeded our expectations. If anything, we had an expectation that they might not be able to hit our bar, and they actually blew us away. So we learned very quickly that this is a very high talent pool. Next slide. So I wanted to share with you guys a sample career path, especially when we talked earlier about the statistic around 85% are underemployed. Let's use the folks who have a degree in computer science as an example. So if you click through this, Randy, I shared with you earlier that they make $8.08 on average working in entry-level jobs. Keep clicking, Randy. I think it's 3 more times. Well, if you get into our technology internship, that internship offers you the opportunity to make $14 to $16 an hour for the period of your summer internship, depending on the year of school that you're in. An entry-level software developer, which if you graduate with a degree in computer science would be your entry-level opportunity, makes $60,000 a year at HEB. And then a senior developer, which is a couple of promotions down that career path away, or the highest level, they can make anywhere from $87,000 to $100,000. So when you think about the potential impact to the employee, to their families, the potential level for independence, and to succeed beyond their wildest, it's really astronomical here. Really what we're trying to do is take people who have a degree in something like computer science and get them on this chart and on their way to their career opportunity, not keep them stagnant in $8 an hour roles that are entry level, that are really beneath their skill and interest and passion level. So next slide. So just summarizing what we've learned here at HEB, allow employees to advocate for themselves. Don't assume accommodations they don't ask for. So Jennifer shared some examples of accommodations someone might ask you for, like noise canceling headphones or quiet. You know, I personally made the mistake of over assuming that people might be too worried about, you know, light sensitivity or noise, and come to find out they actually had no problem with that at all. Many of those were issues that they had worked through in college or in other settings before they actually got to our internship. And so me assuming that they needed anything, it was very quick learning for us that we needed to let them advocate for themselves and ask for what they needed, because assuming actually put them back in that autism box that they didn't want to be in. Our interns exceeded our expectations. I've said that many times, but one big thing is that autism doesn't define a person or their potential. It's just something that they happen to be living with, like many things that many of us are working through. And so we learned very quickly not to make it about autism, but to really meet the person where they were and try to figure out how we could help them move through their journey. Alleviating fear is more important than education. Managers are terrified of doing something wrong and screwing things up. And so what we learned was, rather than spending a ton of time educating them on all of the things that even you've learned here today on autism, it was more important to help them feel confident and comfortable and supported as leaders, that they wouldn't screw up and that they really just needed to feel comfortable treating these employees or partners like just like everyone else, and addressing their concerns and questions as they come rather than over worrying. And then again, managing someone with ASD is not that different from managing other employees. In our experience, you do not have to lower the bar to hire people with ASD at all. And it can be as simple as just finding ways to meet them where they are and address concerns, questions, issues, or accommodations as they come up and as they ask. Next slide. So where are we going next with our program? Well, we do have lots of training and education that we want to do with our managers and our partners to share some of what you guys are learning here today. More about autism, but more about other disabilities as well. Actually, probably better said, more about how to be an inclusive colleague, peer, leader, and trying to educate our workforce on what are the things that they can do to be more sensitive with their language, with the things that they say to people, because we've all unknowingly said something to someone that can be offensive, or and we don't know until we know. I always say, when you know better, you do better. And so what we are trying to do is try to create programs to educate our partners and our leaders on how they can be even more inclusive and even more sensitive to others. Partnerships. So one of the things I'm very proud of is that we're very open to working with employers in the community who are interested in hiring people with autism and other disabilities. So if you're interested in working with us, I'll have an email address. You can contact us up at the end. But we're very open to working with other employers and sharing what we've learned, because we know that this is about doing the right thing, not just for us as an employer, but also for our entire community. And we're happy to partner with employers who are trying to put programs like this in place. Government agencies, we've had a great partnership with the Texas Workforce Commission for a long time. Nonprofits, we work with places like the Unicorn Center here in San Antonio, who help us to get basic employment skills before they actually come to work for us in our stores and other things. So we have lots of folks that we work with and great partnerships, and we want to continue to evolve those. We'll also be adding a Bridges page to our HEB Careers website here this summer, so that you guys can all get more information about our program and how to partner with us, or if you're interested in working for us, how you can learn more about coming through the Bridges program. So just quickly, I have a few tips for employers. You don't need to know everything that there is to know about autism. What you learned today is plenty to get started. Actually, there was so much great information that Jennifer shared. That's probably a great start if you're an employer looking to start a program. Don't assume what people with ASD can do. Match them to meaningful work you need done and that they are passionate about. Don't try to put them in a box. Don't assume that they can just be a bagger or cashier if you happen to have a retail store like us, when they have a degree in computer science and can be a software developer. We sometimes don't have the right understanding about the capabilities of a person. So looking at their capabilities is critically important. Take the emphasis off likability in interviews. Honestly, as a recruiter, I would tell you, you should just do this anyway. There's way too much emphasis on likability in interviews, whether you're interviewing someone on the spectrum or not. But things like smiling and eye contact should not be the first things that we evaluate in an interview. It should be more about, can they do the job? And it's really as simple as that. Also, if you wouldn't hire a neurotypical with that behavior, don't hire the person with ASD. So if they have bad hygiene or tardiness or behavioral challenges that will really prevent them from being successful in the job, then it's important that you don't set them up to fail and you don't put them in that position. And also for employers, and I get this question a lot, you get to say no. You don't have to hire everyone with ASD who applies for a job with you. That may not be a good fit for them. They may not be ready to work or may not be ready for that position. And that's part of the education process. Jennifer Hines was saying earlier, your first job is really the hardest job to get. Once you get your first job, your second, your third might be through mistakes you make or lessons you learn, and that's part of the journey for all of us, not just for those of us with autism. So you don't have to hire everyone, and you get to say no if you need to. Don't hire someone who cannot do the job you don't need them to do. You're just setting them up to fail. That's critically important. If they're not ready to do the job, you really need to, you're not doing anyone a favor by hiring someone into a job they can't be successful at. Tips for parents and advocates who may be on the call, just from our perspective, something that you really need to know about employers is we want to talk directly to our potential employees, not you guys. So prepare them, either your child or whoever you're working to prepare, to advocate for themselves. And I would say that if they're not ready to do that, they may not be ready to work just yet. Because if you cannot advocate for yourself in a professional work environment, it is very difficult to succeed. So focusing on that is a first step, and there are lots of Jennifer Hines was talking earlier about programs that will help prepare with work readiness programs. There are lots of programs out to help prepare your child or the person that you're working with. Making sure that they're ready is a critical part. We cannot find or make a job for a person. You'll need to work to find jobs that they're interested or experienced in. We say we don't give handouts, but we give hand-ups. So that's important because we cannot make a job for a person based on their skills. It's just not something that's feasible for an employer to do person to person, especially an employer our size. We're really large. And so we want to be able to help match people to jobs that we need done and that they can do, because that's the win-win that we were talking about before and where the real long-term potential for success exists. And we're still learning. It is complex to start programs like this, and I just wanted to share with you guys, if it's challenging for us as big ol' HEB, imagine how intimidating this can be for small companies. So you might just want to exercise a little patience when you're going through the interview process or talking to companies. A lot of us are still learning, but we really want to do this and do this well. So if you can just give us a little time, it's programs like this and seminars like this today that will, I think, make it easier for employers to get more active in this space. And then lastly, employers cannot teach basic employment skills, and those were the ones that Jennifer Hines was speaking of early in the call today. Basic communication or advocating for themselves, as I said, has to be something that's learned before you get to the job. We'll teach you job experience, we'll give job skills. It's very difficult if they're not able to do some of the basic communication and some of the basic things. So try to engage in some of those programs and learnings, because that is what will really set the employee up for success. And just briefly, I wanted to share a quick story about Jared. Jared was an intern with us in our initial pilot internship program a couple of years back in 2017. And he was a graduate at Texas A&M with a degree in computer science and had been working several years after graduating college in an hourly position in customer service, was unable to get a job or an interview in his field because he didn't feel comfortable disclosing that he had autism. When we started our program, he shared with us that he had autism. He was interested in working as a software developer. He did so well in his summer internship that he actually interviewed and got a job as a software developer, and now has since been promoted and is absolutely excelling. We actually just did a story that we put on the HEB.com site. It's newsroom.heb.com if you want to go read the article in more detail about Jared. But he is a true success story and an example of a person who, on that chart I shared with you earlier, has jumped out of that $8.08 an hour trap and is now well on his way to a level of financial success and independence, more than he ever could have imagined, and his family. And I love the story of Jared. So if you want to learn more about our program, you can email us at bridges@heb.com. We'll have more information this summer about our program. But really, one thing that I just want to share with all of you is that we believe so strongly that this pool of untapped talent is out there, and people with autism are just amazing, tremendous folks. And if you can engage in being an inclusive employer and trying this out, you absolutely can change the world one person at a time. We genuinely believe it and have seen it. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much, Jen. We have several questions that I think we just have a couple of minutes, but and so if we don't get to your question, we will answer it, and we'll email the answer for you. But a couple of them relate to HEB. So does your program take place also at Central Market?
Not right now, but it could in the future. So if you have an interest in working at Central Market, if you email us at bridges@heb.com, we can try to work with you. But today it does not. We can refer people.
Within the HEB program, what sort of job would someone with a math degree from MIT be available for them?
A lot of jobs, actually, and especially in data analytics and some other opportunities. So if you email us at that email address, your resume, we can get back with you and talk to you about some of the more specific opportunities and openings that we have. I'd like to talk to somebody who has a math degree from MIT, by the way.
We have another graduate from, it says T&M, but I'm not sure if it means A&M. Maybe there is a T&M College Station, so I think it's a typo. But your contact information is up here, bridges@heb.com, so they can contact you. Let's see. Are the internship opportunities only for college-age individuals? I think this is meant for you, Jennifer Hines. I have a high schooler that is interested in something like this for the summer.
Was the question, are they for just college or not just for college?
Right, right.
Yeah, high schooler for the summer earn and learner for high schoolers. And they can be placed in multiple work experiences.
And that's up to age 21 through age 21, right? So some students that might be in high school a little longer.
Yes.
Can still get in as well.
Programs.
Okay. I think there was another one. Are there any trustworthy life coaches to help with the day-to-day living, social interaction, controlling OCD behaviors, dealing with yearning for companionship? I don't know who might be able to answer that, or if it's maybe something we need to research.
I don't know of anything offhand. It's something we have to look up.
All right.
There are life coaches. I know that here in San Antonio, there's different ones that we in the autism community know to send to. Dima Stout was one, but I know that you need to go probably like Autism Life Links. They offer what resources are available, and I believe that they have an area on their website that will talk about coaches, life coaches that are out there. I know of 2 or 3, but I think if you go to autismlifelinks.com, they're a full resource, and you should look up, and they should list several life coaches that are available.
Thank you, Jennifer. And unfortunately, we're out of time, so we're going to have to close. I want to thank you, all the participants, for attending our session today. I'd like to give a special thanks to our presenters and to Texas Closed Captioning for the real-time captioning services. Your training materials will be emailed. I will also, once I upload the information to our YouTube channel, I'll send you a link in case you want to share that with other individuals in the workplace or not in the workplace. This has been a great session. So I thank you all, our 3 Js, and have a great rest of the day.